A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. Good morning. Welcome to a short biblical reflection on the reading from the Gospel according to John chapter 13, in the lectionary verses 31 up to 35, but I will extend it up to verse 38. It is the reading for the fifth Sunday of Easter. It takes place during the Last Supper, when Judas Iscariot already left them, as it is stated in verse 31, and Jesus tells now the disciples, using 5 times the verb glorify. Now the Son of Man is glorified, and God is glorified in him. If God is glorified in him, God will glorify him in himself, and will glorify him at once. In this way, Jesus refers to his glorification, which takes place in his suffering and his death, and consequently in his resurrection. And then Jesus makes this statement in verse 33, "Little children, I am with you only a little longer." Then in the lectionary, the second part of this verse is omitted, but I included it because it links with the verses which follow later. "You will look for me, as I said to the Jews, that where I am going, you cannot come." And then there is this second statement which Jesus makes, the central statement about the new commandment. "So at the present time, I say to you." And also I translated this particular Greek word now a little bit differently. Quite often it is just translated simply now, but this now is different from that one in verse 31. So I translated to see this particular word, which also is used later on in verse 37. "So at the present time I say to you." And now the words which I quoted at the beginning, "A new commandment I give you, that you love one another, just as I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." And then comes the situation with Peter, which of course in lectionary is not anymore included in this Sunday reading, but it goes together because Peter just picks up the words of Jesus when he stated, "Where I am going, you cannot come." He just sticks to these words and doesn't pay attention to the following word about the commandment of love. So Peter asks, "Lord, where are you going?" Jesus answers, "Where I am going, you cannot follow me now, but you will follow afterwards." Peter said to him, "Lord, why can I not follow you at the present time?" And here we have second time the same particular Greek word which I translated in this way as in verse 33. "I will lay down my life for you," just answered. "You will lay down your life for me? Amen, amen, I tell you, before the cock crows, you will have denied me 3 times. So Peter just sticks to Jesus' departure and expresses his willingness, and then is surprised why he cannot follow Jesus at this particular moment, at this present time. But Jesus makes the promise that he will follow him later, afterwards. And now, at the present time, therefore, is this force of this particular expression introduced in verse 33. So at the present time, I say to you. So in this particular situation, now before his suffering, death, and resurrection, comes this commandment, because we could also say that the disciples, in particular Peter, is not yet ready, humanly speaking, to follow Jesus, because he will soon deny him. But what he has now to learn and to practice is this commandment to love one another, because in this way they will demonstrate that they are his disciples. Then the higher demonstration of this higher standard love, to offer his own life for Jesus, he will do it later, but he has also to grow into it. And we'll see it that now this commandment of loving God or of loving one another in this way is now expanded later in chapter 15. So in chapter 15, when we have this saying about Jesus, the true vine, that Jesus says at the beginning, I'm the true vine and my Father is the vine grower. In these sayings, in the second part, about this unity, strict unity between God and his disciples, expressed in the following way, starting from verse 9. As the Father has loved me, so I have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. And then later, verse 12, this is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. And verse 13, no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. This one I highlighted in particular color because we do not have it yet expressed in chapter 13 in our gospel reading, where it's just this love one another. But now the example which Jesus gives in the gospel when he talks about his departure, referring to his suffering, death, and resurrection, this is the true example of his love for us. And now this standard is applied now in this elaboration in chapter 15. To this standard, Peter has still to grow. Therefore, he simply, at this present time, he is asked to learn and to practice love one another, and this will be proof for others that they are Jesus the Christ disciples. And now the saying, chapter 15 concludes with the following words. These things I command you, that you may love one another. Summing up, this today's reading focuses just on this commandment given at the present time, that the disciples are asked to simply practice this mutual love, to love one another, and that will be sufficient proof for others to know, to recognize that they are the disciples of Jesus. And the higher standard, that eagerness which Peter already expressed, that he wanted to follow Jesus, he will follow it later as Jesus promised it here in our gospel in this extension which I added. But he still has to grow in his faith and his love for the Lord. Once he will be ready, he will do it. And this also applies to us, to our situation. We have to start simply with this mutual love for one another, and then we can have the love which we read also in chapter 15, that no one has greater love than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends. Once we grow in our love, we will be able also to sacrifice ourselves more for the sake of others. I wish you a nice day, a nice reflection on this gospel. God bless you.